Welcome back, my brave and beautiful humans, to another episode of Soul Hygiene. I am in such awe of this person I'm going to introduce you to. He is so amazing. His name is Mr. Eric, and I came about him just from a friend of a friend who wanted me to put my name in for some things just to get introduced to him. And he is currently my executive coach, and we're focused on motivation. But he is so many things. I sometimes I'm at a loss for words because he just says the most important things at the most important time. We've been going through a couple of coaching sessions where I didn't even know how I was feeling. And all of a sudden, he just says the right word. And bam, oh my goodness, I did not know it was even there. So it's just so cool the way that he interacts with people. So I was really excited to get him on the show just to introduce him to everyone. On his website, if you go to Eric, I think it's
Mhm.
Lanigan.com. So ELANIG, no, Eric, and then LANIGAN.com. You'll see his website. So I really do encourage you all to go there. The first thing that caught my eye when I went to his website when I was getting introduced to him was he says, "Hi, I'm Eric. I help people wake up clear, inspired, and grateful." And those are just some things that I've been working on the last 5 years through my healing journey. And I knew right away we were gonna connect, and there was going to be something great come out of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Eric and let him just introduce himself to all of my listeners, and we'll just see where it goes from there. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was quite an intro. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, you, I think with the first time I was a little trepidatious when we got, our first call, um, just because I have these walls that I didn't realize I still had. Um, but it was like that first coaching session we had, I was like, my walls were crumbling, and I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, I
Oh,
don't understand, you know.
yeah.
But it was really good because I think everyone needs to experience a breaking down of their walls, especially when you've been through so much trauma and you've had years of abuse. You don't trust people. And even though I've been on this intentional healing journey for 5 years, there's always things to learn and always ways to grow. So I am very grateful and appreciative for you and for you coming into my life because I know we're going to be great friends. And um, yeah, so that was kind of our first coaching session.
Yeah.
I'll let him talk now because I'm just so excited he's here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Eric. I've been coaching. It's basically the only thing I've ever done. Uh, I started way back, my first kind of sort of career. I started trading stocks when I was 13 because I thought that money was the way that I should find happiness in the world based on how my little 13-year-old brain was processing where happiness comes from, and looking at social media, well, not social media, but the media and
Hmm.
everything you consume growing up in society. And I lucked into some trades. I don't think that I like, there was not a lot of really thinking about things, I don't think, going on at 13. I just happened to get lucky with where I put money in, that the $3,000 I invested turned into $9,000. And then I started to get into derivatives. And eventually, when I was 19, I had like a day trading mentor who had great success, was a part of a trading group that only had like one down month in 20 something years. And so I was like in the process of joining
Wow.
this this kind of trading group and starting to raise, thinking about raising capital for that. Um, and he got me into meditation because if you want to day trade, you need to really be emotionally clear that you're executing a plan. You're not going to try and chase something
Mm.
that's not there. Um, and uh, I, after going to like this local meditation center for 4 or 5 sessions, one time I had this really strong feeling right in the center of my forehead. And that was it in that experience. And about a week later, after I was wrapping up day trading practice in the morning, I walked out through the cafeteria doors into the sort of misty Seattle Pacific Northwest weather in the fall and took a bite out of a cafeteria cookie and landed in this like unconditional joy that didn't make sense. It was this happiness that was sort of way beyond anything I had gotten trading. And so that like I didn't really know what to do with it. Like I came out of that experience, was like, I don't know how this happened, but I know that that experience is more important than making money now. Like it's going to hold my attention a lot better. So I stopped trading. I really gave it up like 4 months later. And I ended up living at my favorite professor's house for a few months and TA'd for my favorite college class. And then ended up following kind of the winds to different retreat centers and to different mentored houses. And at one point to Ecuador. And it was in Ecuador that I met a guy who's a horse whisperer and did equine addiction therapy. And I went and like lived with him and his family for 6 months in Canada and kind of just followed this trail um, until it seemed like the learning, that absorption for those 2 years of knowledge, like kind of died away, and it was time to put that to practice. And really, the only thing that made sense at that point was coaching. That people started to like open up to me randomly, so I was like, okay, well, we can do this. Um, so that's how that began. Um, I burned through all of that money that I had like saved up, and so at some point I needed to get a job while the coaching was starting off, and so I took care of a quadriplegic at night, 4 nights a week in Berkeley, California, where I had sort of landed, and that's that's like I did that for 2.5 years, and at the end, like I had enough income from coaching that I could let that go, and we moved across the country for my wife's surgery residency in New York City. So like I left that job and just made that full transition as we moved to New York. Yeah. So that's just what
Wow.
I've been doing.
The first thing I thought of when you said you experienced so much joy from biting a cookie, I was like, yeah, I get joy too from eating,
Yeah.
but it's a different kind of joy. Um, I'm on a different kind of journey right now. So that's really amazing because I am sure that you learn so much from different people and were able to hone your skills and even having like all of all of those lessons and all that growth during that time has made you the person you are now, which you're just, I mean, I don't consider myself, how should I say it? I'm pretty vulnerable on my
Mhm.
podcast. I tell my life because I feel like that's what people need to hear. They need to hear that somebody made it out of abuse, out of victimhood. Um, but until I sat down with you that first session, I did not realize that I still had quite a few walls, you know,
Mhm.
um, because I think the one thing I admire about Mr. Eric, and I will say this, he lets you feel what you need to feel and just kind of talks you through it. And I think that's what I experienced, like that very first one. And
Yeah.
then the second one we had, I mean, we literally sat there in silence, which I never have silence around me. So it was like a very peaceful moment to just be able to sit and meditate and really feel what's going on inside you. And I think that's the one thing I admire so much about what you do is that you allow that person to just feel what they're feeling
Mhm.
and just walk them through it, you know, and kind of just help them navigate. Okay, you're feeling this way. Why are you feeling this way? And you have a soothing voice, which always helps when you're coaching someone in that kind of capacity. But yeah, that's kind of my take on kind of what we are doing together right now, and I
That,
think it's really helped me. Um, I think one way it's helped me is I was trying to think of an instance, but there's actually been a few of them after our last session. I think it's helped me realize that when I'm feeling a certain way, it's okay to feel that way. It's
mhm.
okay not to bury it. It's okay to be like, okay, I'm feeling sad right now. Take a deep breath. Why am I feeling sad? Is it something I can deal with right now, or is it something I need to just put to the side and deal with, a little bit later? Um, but like an incident happened last week where I got my feelings hurt, and an emotional person. you know, I'm never gonna lie about that. But someone just really hurt my feelings, and I was sad. I was kind of crying over it. And then I was like, do I really need to cry about this? Why am I sad about it? And kind of walked myself through these steps. And then by the time I was done, within 10 minutes, I was fine. And
Mhm.
I think I learned that our first session was it's okay to feel what you're feeling. I think growing up and being in certain situations for me, it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay to feel those feelings. And so as an adult, now I'm learning, you know, yeah, you don't have to have a wall up for everyone. You just need to have some boundaries, but it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Deal with it. You can either
Mhm.
move on or let it bother you for the rest of your life. you know? So yeah, that's my take. I'll let Mr. Eric talk a little bit too. He's
Yeah, I
quite
mean,
a quiet person, but
yeah, you're describing it perfectly. So there's no need for me to talk. It's perfect.
like, why
Basically,
am I here?
yeah, no, it's great. Your uptake is awesome. I mean,
Well,
it's
and
noticing how you're feeling.
mhm,
It's noticing how you're
yeah.
feeling so that you're not like employing strategies
Hmm.
to avoid feeling what you're feeling. You just might as well feel it if it's there. Feel it. And the easiest way to feel it is to feel it just as a physical sensation,
Hmm.
where once it has a gravity to it as an emotion and a narrative, and then there's an imagination and there's all these things to do, and it starts to spiral out of control. You can almost you call it rumination in a way. And what this place to start where you can actually feel deep emotions and stay with them is to just find that physical aspect of that feeling. And when you're in that physical aspect of the feeling, your capacity for feeling it just gets a lot better because
Hmm.
you're not managing the interpretation mechanism. You're just feeling it. And if it's a tight energy in the center of the chest or it's like a pinching energy, I mean, really, there's not much emotionally that feels worse than a strong pinch. I
Hmm.
can pinch my arm pretty hard. And the emotion will never really feel much worse than that physically.
Right. I think that is totally correct because I have such a vivid imagination. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes I would go into panic attacks or anxiety because I'm worrying about things that are never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm taking that, like, last week, had it been, say, 5 years ago when I was feeling sad, I would have taken that sadness, and I like that word ruminated. I would have just soaked in that. And then I would have spiraled, and then I would have thought about all these different scenarios in my head as to, and it would have lasted, and the anxiety would have got bigger. And then I think the analogy of a snowball rolling down a hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that that is anxiety. That is the perfect
Yeah.
definition or the analogy of anxiety,
Mhm.
because it starts out small, and if you don't deal with it at the root, at the core of what the anxiety is, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon you have a
Yeah.
six snowman, and you're like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
you know
And there is a beautiful thing though about it is that what's happening with the anxiety with that, it's really a stress mechanism or a distress mechanism. At some point, you end up here and now. You're just like, you just wake up because at
Mhm.
that point, the stress is just it's mounting a request for consciousness. And so what ends up happening to relieve that or to resolve that is you would just become conscious and you start to notice the feelings.
Yeah.
Here I am right now in this moment in these circumstances. So there's four walls around me. It's relatively safe. So I can actually breathe and feel
Yeah.
and start to regulate if there's dysregulation. And oftentimes there's dysregulation, and that's
Right.
okay.
Like my heart will start pounding out of my chest, and I have to, that's what I do. I put my hand on my chest, and I
Yeah.
am a tapper. Like I tap a lot.
Mhm.
I'll tap on my arms, or I tap on, like, on my head or my chin. Um, but yeah, that's what I do. It's like I feel I've been able to calm myself down out of panic attacks since I
Mhm.
was about 3 years ago. But lately, just from our two sessions, it's been 5 minutes. And I really don't have a lot of panic attacks or anxiety attacks anymore,
Yeah.
um, because I do have a lot more clarity and a lot more um, productive, you know, things going on in my head instead of the worrying and the anxiety.
What
Um,
you've installed some really helpful ways to not go into the victim pattern so that you've
yeah,
inhibited a bunch of different ways of interpreting emotions
right.
out of the you basically said I won't interpret my emotions as if I'm a victim anymore. So now those emotions are only empowering you
I
for the
love
ones
that.
for the ones that you know how to process. The other ones are still in the process of finding a way to be interpreted
Right.
without the
Yeah,
victim context. And I
right.
think that's almost what happened on our last session is just getting in touch with those feelings and realizing that there doesn't have to be a victim complex and just feeling emotions. It's natural and normal and wonderful and beautiful aspect of being a human being to feel emotions. And they're just signals ultimately for what's longed for.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you just put that into the exact words that, that I'm thinking, because that's completely true. And I think our first section session, I told you I refuse to be a victim. Like that is one thing that if something comes my way or I get hurt or whatever, I will not go back into that victim mentality. So I do everything I can to switch that mindset almost immediately. But I think having the availability to sit with you for 20, 30 minutes at a time in just peace. And honestly, I think the last session was sadness, and I felt it in my shoulders and my neck. And then as we sat there and I was able to just feel it, know what it was, release it, it ended up just almost culminating into this like peaceful, okay, I'll let it go. Right in the middle of my chest where my heart is, and just okay, I'm done. Um, so it was very beautiful for me because I've never been in that situation where I could control or feel something and just go through it.
Yeah. Allow it.
Yeah, because I told you our first session, I have boxes, mental boxes where
Mhm.
if I feel something and I don't want to deal with it, or it's a trigger or traumatic, okay, I mentally close my eyes, pull it out, and put it in a box, almost like, putting it away for another day.
Yeah.
um, but slowly, I think through our process, because I created my meditation technique a couple years ago that's really helped me. And it kind of goes along the lines of it because I just ask myself simple questions. Who is causing this? Using the who, what, when, where, why.
Hmm.
Who is causing this? What happened? Running myself through these questions. And I think feeling those feelings and allowing myself
Yeah.
to, okay, I can bring one out of the box at a time and just let me feel it because I do feel, like you said, I feel more empowered
Hmm.
now that I have a mindset that is a positive, productive, creative one. I feel more powerful when I'm feeling those things that I did not want to feel 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know, I'm getting all tingly just thinking about it because it is very beautiful to me. And I think any person who has gone through a traumatic experience like mine, was PTSD abuse for like 25 years. I don't feel like people need to go through that long of a traumatic experience to, really find themselves. But I think anyone who's experienced anything, if they sat down with you for an hour, they'd be a different person coming out, that's for sure. So that's that's my take on Mr.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I love it. And I think the one thing that sets you apart from, you know, I guess they could put you in the life coach category, but I don't know if you're really like just in that category. You're more of you bring out the peacefulness, the productiveness. I think after our first session, even after our second session, I felt like, wow, the creativity in my brain was just on fire.
Mm.
And I felt more focused and I had more clarity. Um, and I think that could help anybody, especially who is an entrepreneur in business, um, who gets overwhelmed. But I work a full-time job and do this and take care of my parents. So we need it a lot. So I think having that clarity and not feeling overwhelmed and not being, you know, anxiety ridden really, really helps me. And now I have the techniques along with what I was already doing. Um, I don't think you can have enough coping mechanisms. I think there's always
Yeah.
room for more.
Well,
And you,
ultimately, we resolve the things that we need to cope with.
yeah.
But we use the coping mechanisms intentionally. So you're eating to take the edge off your emotions so that you can actually be with the emotions. Because if the emotions are at a 10 out of 10, you try to muscle your way to be aware of them, and then you just get beaten down, and then you go into some super autopilot and you go unconscious. Or you that autopilot is the whatever, maybe binge eating that takes the emotions away entirely. But the
Mm-hmm.
way to be conscious through that whole process is to just notice that, oh, when I take a bite of food, I am taking the edge off. Well, what foods actually take the edge off emotions the best without it affecting your energy levels? I know for myself, like a little piece of dark chocolate will actually take the edge off emotions pretty significantly and it'll let me feel those feelings in my body.
You know
And
what?
yeah,
That is a good. I'm glad you said that because I'm on this, health journey.
yeah,
So, And that's, I don't know, this is just out of the blue, but because you said that, it kind of clicked in my head. I bought peaches last week, and I love tahini. Um, and I'm allergic to most high citric stuff. But tahini
Hmm.
doesn't really bother me, which is funny.
Yeah.
But when I was last week going through that sadness and going, if my heart starts pounding, the one thing, the one food is like a very fruity food with some tahini, and it almost keeps me down.
Mm.
But I'm, on this health journey where I want to put good things in my body,
Yeah.
along with words, along with a good mental mindset,
Mhm.
along with food. And I love that you said that, because food does have a lot to do with how we think and how we react. So if we're eating a lot of sugar, and this is just me, this is how I've realized my body reacts when we eat a lot of sugar, our energy is just, it plummets. And
Mhm.
then we feel those negative feelings a lot more than we do the positive ones, because we're just at a lull, we're down, we're drained, and we're at a point where I think stress and anxiety can overcome us a lot more when we're not at our best. But if we're putting good foods in, we have that energy, we have that spark, that light. We can keep going. And I notice, like, I'm on the treadmill a lot more. I'm eating healthy. I'm, doing a lot more things with my
Mhm.
parents and you know, my grandbabies. And I love that you
Yeah.
said it, because food does have a lot to do with how we react to stress and anxiety.
Yep. And really, really the whole process is really simple. It's just being able to feel your emotions as physical sensations, which when you can do that, then you can feel all of the feelings. And that's the practice. And tapping helps you stay in the present moment,
It does, yeah.
right? Putting your hands on your body helps you stay in, you're touching something physical in the present moment. So that helps you stay in the present where you can feel the physical, rather
Yeah.
than go out of the present into imagination where you're not in touch with reality, that you can ground yourself and it's actually safe because there's not a tiger who's about to eat you, right? Even though it feels like it may
Yeah.
be, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the being able to feel in that way, and then once that depth of feeling is developed, and it gets developed over time, then there's feeling how actions feel to take before, during, and after taking them. And that lets us shift. So we have, like, I want to lose weight might be an intention, but there's what next action, and how does that next action feel? Because if the next action is, well, I'm going to commit to not eating until 2 p.m. every day for the next 2 months, like that would feel one particular way.
Right.
And that might, maybe that's just too extreme. Maybe that's not something that actually feels like something you want to do. And so it's not, the process is just keeping that destination in mind, but continuing to run experiments. And if those experiments fail, that doesn't mean that you failed to get to your destination. That means you're learning about how it feels. What would feel better? What would feel better than this? What would feel better than this?
Right.
And you're just finding what feels better. And it's the easiest personal growth journey you could possibly take,
Hmm.
because you're not willpowering yourself through your own emotions. You're just paying attention to what would feel best and letting that pull your attention.
And I think once you're able to do that, you become that person who can be disciplined.
It's a different kind of discipline. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
the
yeah,
gravity has switched. So it's
yeah,
actually hard to be non-disciplined.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. I love how, and that's what we're working on. We're
Yeah.
working on we're working on that, being more productive. And I actually think your website says that, like you're more productive, you're more creative. Um,
Mhm. And I'll say that discipline doesn't mean forcing yourself to stick to a plan.
Right.
Disciplined means having checked in with yourself and aware of what's the most important next action.
Yeah.
Because then you're
Well,
basically using the 80-20 rule over and over and over and over and over again.
mm,
You're finding the most important thing because it's the thing that's felt strongest.
mm,
And you say yes to the feeling, and how does that feeling guide me in my life in that circumstance in a way that takes me towards love and joy? And then you take an action and see how it feels.
and maybe I'm going to try and explain how this thought that just when you become, so what I've noticed in myself, like because I'm starting to do those steps and become disciplined in my thought process and how I'm handling my feelings. It's almost like a lake that runs into an ocean, right? You have all your feelings in this lake, but when you're disciplined and when you are able to tap into that and really say every time it happens, okay, I'm all right, and go through those steps, like we've been talking about, it's like that
Mm-hmm.
lake runs into the ocean and you become disciplined in other areas of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It goes into those other areas. So, like, example, last week when I talked about that moment I had, um, I was able to feel it. Where was it? You know, calm it down within minutes and still be able to stay on track. I wanted to stay on track with the rest of my day.
Mm-hmm.
So it just, I think when you have that mind switch first and you start your healing journey and you start bringing all these good things into your life, everything around you changes. It's not the same anymore. And that's where I'm saying, like, when you're disciplined with how you feel and doing these steps, the rest of your life, it's going to seep into these other areas. And
Mm-hmm.
if you acknowledge it and let it can totally change everything around you. And you become
Yeah.
a person that, wow, I didn't know I could be this person. I'm a completely different person than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And now I'm learning even more. So that excites me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It excites me that that I not ran across you. I guess I was intentionally, I feel like it was a divine intervention actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that that happened because I think that people need to hear this side of coaching. They're also used to the quote unquote life coach, which I think
Yeah.
just
It's
get
kind of
grouped.
uncoaching in a way. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just letting your body already knows what it wants. Your
you're just
attention already
guiding
knows
them.
where it wants to go. You're just learning how to let that
Yeah,
do its thing. You're getting the
yeah,
limiting beliefs and insecurities out of the way, is what you're doing. And then at
yeah.
that point, you're authentic.
Well, and when you said uncoaching, the first thing that came into my mind was I'm uncoaching myself. I'm taking all these negative thoughts, all these feelings that I've had in me for all these years,
Mhm.
and I'm letting the goodness,
Yeah.
overpower those things and just letting, and I like the thing that we've talked about a couple times, and I think you just mentioned it on here. It's not that sadness and anger are bad feelings. They're just feelings.
Hmm.
That's their emotions. And it's okay to feel those emotions.
They're signals. They're
Yeah.
giving you direction. They're either a cause they're caused either caused by the present circumstances that you could take action and resolve. So they're helping you guide you in this moment, or it's possible that triggered by the present circumstances, but really caused by some trauma or conditioning in the past. But the only way you can make that assessment is by feeling them.
Hmm.
If you feel them and they don't go away or resolve in some way, then they're often signals about your present.
Yeah.
And now at that point, it's just like, well, what is the signal? Well, it could be this. Let me take an action and see how that feels. And then your life just starts to align. And those you start to have a relationship with these feelings, which in your childhood most likely weren't uh, like talked about in your family.
Yeah.
Most emotions weren't acceptable because they needed to follow rules, and emotions come up in opposition to having to follow rules. So those emotions get squashed.
Right. And I want to say, like, my parents, you only know what you know, right? So my parents are absolutely amazing people, kind, compassionate. Um, but if they're, I think that not every parent knows this kind of communication.
Yeah,
And I think if more parents did, there'd be a, a lot less of there are a lot less victims for sure.
yeah. And in the parenting context, just letting the kids have their emotions
Yeah. I
and
mean,
just being
within
curious.
parameters,
What's
obviously, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, like noticing what happens when a child's crying, and notice how if you don't oppose that crying, it resolves on its own, and their body is better regulated
Mhm.
if you let it cry itself into calm.
So that's interesting. I'm gonna have to meditate on that because I feel like
Mhm.
that is very true because I know that I'll go into crying spells sometimes just, sadness or just hormones, whatever they are. But when I'm done, I'm like, okay, I'm wore out, but I'm good.
Yeah,
My
like
body
this is
just kind of comes back together. Just had to cry it out.
yeah. Right at the end, there's that
Yep. Yep.
right, right
Almost
at the
like, okay, I'm
yeah.
back.
Mhm. And you can
Yeah.
even actually use that last breath, like at the end of crying, that as a way of grounding in the present, if you want, because that is a regulating breath. But it's also just like stopping, right? That's the best advice to achieve something. Just stop stopping. And it's also like the best advice to allow yourself to feel what wants or needs to be felt and find a safe environment to do that. If you need to be around other people to do that, they're
Right.
trained other people, like do that. But like
I love
you're feeling it already. There's no reason not to just allow it to really be felt consciously.
right.
Otherwise, you're stuck, uh, numbing it and distracting from it day in and day out.
Yeah,
And there's
for
never
years.
calm.
And you don't need to do that. I
Yeah.
think as we wind down, what is something that you would like to leave the listeners just with maybe some encouragement? Um, but I also want you to give them your information and your
Yeah.
websites
Well,
because
that
I
can
do
kind of,
encourage people to reach out to you.
yeah, that can overlap too. I mean, you can find me on EricLanigan.com. The other thing that I'd recommend is I have a subreddit on Reddit. That's reddit.com/r/emotions to actions.
Oh, I
Uh,
like that.
Emotions and then TO actions. Because that's essentially what we're doing in this
Right,
process. And
right.
so I have a free 15-minute check-in call that's live every day at 9:30 Pacific that you can join. And if you can't make it, just watch the recording, which I post to that subreddit every day. And then you can ask questions below, or if you can make it to the live calls, there's a Zoom registration right there. in the description of the subreddit. So
That's wonderful. Well, we'll definitely put that, you'll have to email me that link so I can put that in
yeah,
the box so we can have people, just log on there. I mean, that's a good way just to get in contact or get in touch or just be able to ground yourself in the morning to get going. Let's
sure,
just
exactly.
whatever people want to use it for. So I so appreciate you and I look forward to our next session. But
Yeah, thanks for
we
having me.
definitely might have to do this again. And I say that quite frequently to a lot of my guests, but
Yeah,
really, um, I enjoy the capacity that we have right now to just, you know, let people know there's a different way of healing, and this is the one of the most essential ways to do it, and probably the easiest if you're willing to just do it. So
yeah.
I don't, it's once it happens, it's pretty phenomenal and a blessing. So I will tell you that. But
Hmm.
all
Yeah,
right, well, deep breath like we always do at the end of our sessions. And we're only supposed to go 30 minutes, but every time we get talking, we always
no, that's perfect.
but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
I feel like, what is said is supposed to be said. So but I will end the show here and I appreciate everyone for joining us for another episode of
thanks for
Soul
joining us.
Hygiene. We'll see you later.